This is your World War III update. So I've had an opportunity to meditate on the events of the day, and I think I have some insights about what's about to happen. Now, many of you know, some of you probably don't, that I've been talking about a prospective Iranian conflict long before Trump was president. In fact, I predicted it was going to happen while Biden was president. I predicted it was going to happen before Election Day. And that prediction was actually vindicated by the fact that the Israelis were planning their big attack that they did to start the war for over a year. So that was actually in preparation throughout Biden's term. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I think I've earned my accreditation as a trend forecaster at this point in time. Now, in order to accurately decipher the fog of war, you need to understand something. Most of the information that you are provided, with the exception of the odd leak, is going to be either misdirection or a ruse or nominal data that is not overly detailed or useful. And so all of the information you're getting in terms of talking points provided by the administration or intelligence agencies is usually there as a red herring to send you on a wild goose chase. Or you really almost have to look more at the timing of the information and contextualize it amidst what you're actually seeing on the ground. As I always say, watch where the weapons are going, because that doesn't lie. What are the weapons flows telling us right now? That this in no way was a one-trick pony strike. This is only the beginning of a much broader intervention. And there's an inherent contradiction taking place in the fact that Trump is still wanting the Iranians to negotiate a deal, whilst at the same time insisting that they've destroyed their nuclear program. So what is it? If you destroyed the nuclear program, why is Israel, at the time of making this video, doing widespread strikes across Iran? What could the purpose of that possibly be? Because all you cared about was the nuclear program. Well, clearly it's about regime change. It's about installing a puppet government, and it's about total and complete capitulation and the concession of defeat. That's what Trump called for. Remember that. So those two things just really don't add up. Now, is Iran going to dutifully take it on the chin and not retaliate as obviously the United States is expecting them to? There's a lot of things that we have to cover here, because again, the information that we're being provided is what they want us to hear. We really have to look beyond the information that we're given if we want to make sense of this. And one thing is for certain, they want regime change. They haven't amassed all of that firepower in that region just to willy-nilly take 3 stealth bombers in there, bounce. If that was the case, they would have no need for this stuff. Even if for a defense of American military bases and posturing, it just wouldn't make sense for them doing all of these evacuations. No, this war has only just begun. So now, again, we must also keep in mind that the Iranians have their population on full lockdown right now as well, in terms of suspension of access to internet services, very tight restrictions on communications and videographing, any sensitive military sites. And because Iran is so big and vast, a lot of these military installations, and because it's mountainous, there's not a lot of lines of sight to all of these military facilities. So unless you're a passerby on that one lone highway at the right period of time, you might not see anything, right? So that's just something to also keep in mind. Now, let's just first go over the details, and then we're going to try to pick this all apart. But if you don't have much time, all you need to know is that any normalcy Norman who says that, see, that's it, they get to go home. Look, you really think that this is going to suffice for the Israelis who've been trying to bait the United States into a conflict for the longest time? Of course not. And no, the strikes on Fordow were likely ineffective. We'll get into that in a moment. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There were 6 massive ordnance penetrators that were dropped on Fordow. And as far as I know, the United States don't have many of these large conventional munitions like the Moab and the MOPs. They're in very, very short supply. So it's not like they can do this every day. The facility was engineered to survive such strikes. They have curved tunnels, they have offset caverns, they have all kinds of redundant systems. The Iranians are not stupid. This is what they do, okay? They can't even defeat the tunnels in the Gaza Strip or Lebanon. Remember, Nasrallah died of asphyxiation. It's not that they could penetrate that deep with their GB, I think it was a 28 bunker buster, which is much smaller than this one. Regardless, even hammering that place with multiples, they couldn't get hit. So the idea that a massive facility that's 90 meters deep, and in some parts it's actually has a mountain up top that has 500 meters of granite. I mean, it's dumb to believe that this worked. And the idea that they're claiming that instantly, as it happened, that they conclusively knew that it worked is bullshit, because the only way you would know is if you had some guy on the ground in the facility, and it would be impossible to communicate, I'm sure, out of that place unless you had some secret CIA comm system, right? We know there's spies. Sure, there's spies probably in and around that place, but to have somebody on the inside and being able to relay that information like in real time as it's happening, likely not. There is no confirmed core damage. Iran reports continued enrichment and no internal collapse. Now, there's mixed reports, and you really have to take this stuff with a grain of salt because there's a lot of disinformation right now. But there are mixed reports that the Americans tipped off the Iranians the night before and said, hey, you got to get out of this facility. We need a Pyrrhic victory, and we're going to bomb the facility, and then we're going to call it even Steven, all right? And then maybe you can hit our military bases, which will be empty at that time, and then we'll all walk away. Well, what would the point of that be when you really think about it? The United States never had to enter this conflict. Even yesterday, there was an Israeli intelligence officer who was saying that they had already set the Iranian nuclear program back 2 to 3 years, just by virtue of taking out the nuclear scientists and the attacks that they've been waging on the surface level facilities. So they could have walked away. No, this is the beginning of something big. Look, I've been warning you guys. I've been calling this game since day one. I'm telling you right now, do not get complacent with this. This is, and I'm not saying, oh, you got to freak. I'm just saying it's not over. This is only the start of it. Anyone with half a brain should be able to see that. To truly destroy Fordow, you would likely need, precision-timed weapons. You would need way more than 6. You would probably need some nuclear component. Like, this could have been a test run for an actual nuclear strike on the facility, because you could potentially use the GBU-57, I presume, to cut a hole in there, and then you send the tactical nuke in there, which is lighter, and they could probably carry more of those. But here's the thing. They have hundreds of underground missile cities that are buried in the sides of mountains that they could have just moved this stuff to. Even Fox News was talking about another facility where they were actually supposed to be manufacturing nuclear weapons. So this whole thing, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that they would telegraph it. It doesn't make sense that Seymour Hersh broke the story and is still walking around to tell the tale. You know what I mean? So maybe maybe he was permitted to leak that information. You know what I mean? Like, some of these things just really, like, this was the most telegraph punch in history. And then all the OSINT guys were, commenting on the mastery of showing that the B-2 stealth bombers that left Whitman Air Force Base flew in the opposite direction, and they did this circuitous route around, so it made it look, I mean, come on, they knew it was going to happen. Professor Morandi was on live like an hour before it happened, and he's like, yeah, they're probably going to do it today. Everybody knew it was going to happen. So there was no 4D chess here, except the 4D chess that we don't see right now. Okay, and that's what we need to try to decipher. Everything that we're talking about here is probably meaningless bullshit. And no, I'm not one of these people, nothing happened at all. Of course something happened. We just don't know the extent of what happened. If these bombs were detonated underground, there is a certain fireball that gets expunged on the surface, but it's not going to be as big as, you know, like an above ground massive ordnance blast, thermobaric type blast. You're not going to necessarily see it. So there might only be small plumes of smoke emanating from Fort Al. So people who are using that, and these are the same people who are like, 1/3 of Tel Aviv is destroyed, and you know, that's bullshit. Is Tel Aviv getting hit hard? Yes. But if I'll tell you what that is all about, the over-exaggeration of the impacts in Tel Aviv, it's all a part of humanizing Israelis and dehumanizing everybody else. Every broken fingernail in Israel is worth the lives of 100 Palestinians and Iranians. You see the explosions coming out of Iran. They are massive. Sure, a lot of them are optical. They're hitting refineries, but why don't we see that in Israel? Now, you can say it's because Israel has the place on lockdown. It's illegal. They're used to living under that form of regimentation, and it's a smaller country, so maybe it's a little bit easier to manage. But on that token, you can see a lot of what's happening in Israel from Lebanon. You can see it from the Gaza Strip. You can see it from the West Bank. So how much can they possibly hide? Anyways, be careful about embellishing the details of Iranian strikes on Israelis and thinking it's some kind of win, because really what you're doing is you're adding to that psyop that an Israeli life is worth a lot more than a Palestinian life, when I don't believe that. I believe all lives are equal in this conflict. That's not a statement of who's right and who's wrong. It's just a fact of civilian life is as equal on all parts of the map. Now, dropping 6 massive ordnance penetrators implies that 2 to 3 B-2s flying deep into contested airspace, no radar, strike, escort evidence supports this. They would obviously have lots of escorts. Presumably, if the Iranians knew this was coming, they must have had some kind of air defense that would pick up some faint signature, you would think, you know, but still no evidence, no visual or seismic confirmation, no craters, no heat flares, no SAR imagery. We did see some imagery. It was a very small plume of smoke, though in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that magnificent. Tomahawk strikes on Natanz and Esfahan seem to be symbolic strikes, because why would you, the Tomahawk missile doesn't carry a massive payload. It can carry a nuke, but for a conventional payload, it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you could, if you have total control over the airspace like they claim, you could have used your fighter jets for something like that. Why use 30 Tomahawks? Maybe to overwhelm the air defense. But again, these facilities are dug deep underground. And so these cruise missiles that are subsonic aren't penetrating that deep. They can carry bunker busters, but not near what you're getting when you can drop it from an airplane. And even now, the United States is saying that the Isfahan nuclear complex was way stronger and deeper than their knowledge, and it might have remained unaffected by missile strikes. So what was the point of that, right? Netanyahu, this is not going to suffice for him. This is not going to suffice for the Israeli warhawks who want the U.S. to enter the war. It's not going to be like, okay, we did something, now we're going to bounce. What would the point of that be? Especially as the Israelis are still hammering as we speak. So this was likely, there's a lot of psychological operation to this. Something happened. We don't know what happened. Maybe the United States did hit something significant and the Iranians aren't admitting to it because, well, for obvious reasons, they don't want to admit to it. And the U.S. doesn't want to admit where they hit them for whatever reason. But again, that's just speculation. But this is what we have to do. People say, why are you speculating? Because the information you're getting is bullshit. It's meaningless information that you're getting. It's all nominal data that they want you to send you on a wild goose chase. You can't predict anything. If you were to just listen to what Trump is saying, you wouldn't know what the fuck is going on. Everything that comes out of that guy's mouth since he was elected has been a lie. oh, I'm going to open up Fort Knox and I'm going to tell you all about the mysterious drones flying around New Jersey and Epstein. And, you know, what does he do? He goes and bombs Iran and blows up a bunch of Russian nuclear bombers. And people are still like, well, it's part of the plan. Okay, so maybe there's some domestic stuff he did right. This is not a personality call. Why do people lionize this guy? I don't get it. It's not, fucking politicians don't make the decisions. That's what you need to understand. Prepping transcends politics because we know that our politics are wholly inept at effectively administrating a society during the best of times, much less in the worst of times. And they're always going to lie. Special interests rule the day. This is simple to understand. That's the first thing. If you can get over that, that's like 90% of being able to accurately trends forecast is not being somebody's wingman. Now, the IAEA is saying that there's no rise in radiation levels outside the nuclear sites. Now, when we had the nuclear scientists on the channel, they talked about how, yeah, there probably wouldn't be. For one, it's underground, and the uranium that's being enriched there is not enriched to such an extent that it's going to, if there was some radiological explosion of like a dirty bomb type explosion, it's not enriched to the point where it would be, you know, a huge, obvious environmental disaster where you could see these radioactive signatures they were easily detectable. And of course, the Iranians are never going to trust the IAEA because Grossi and the IAEA for the last decade at least have been forwarding all of the information about their nuclear program to the Israelis, who've been then using that data to formulate this attack plan. So, you know, in terms of the damage assessment at the sites, nobody's going to know. And the Iranians right now, there are some officials who are saying that no damage was done. Well, why would you even say that, right? Because then that's going to give the Trump administration the license they need to go and hit it again. But this time with tactical nuclear weapons. Oh, that didn't work. Well, Trump already said that it was completely and totally obliterated. Now, this guy changes his mind every day. So he could come out tomorrow and say, well, our initial damage assessment was flawed, and it turns out that the facility is still intact. Now, the only way to destroy it is with a tactical nuclear weapon. The next attacks will be more widespread and easier to carry out, he says, already foreshadowing that there's going to be more attacks. But again, why would there be more attacks if there wasn't, if there wasn't a nuclear program anymore? Problem solved. There are currently vessels that are quickly transiting the Strait of Hormuz, seemingly to get through before the Iranians potentially shut down the strait. The Iranians are going to respond. We just don't know to what extent. It could be much like True Promise 1, where it was a very telegraph punch. They told the Israelis exactly what they were going to do. They did a bunch of ineffectual hits on ineffectual targets, and they just basically wanted to make a point. That could be what they do, much like what they did with Soleimani. Mind you, I would say this is a bigger deal than Soleimani's death even, because of course this is a multi-billion-dollar program if it's true that they destroyed it. But from the Iranian point of view, you would want to, just if it wasn't destroyed, just say, sure, it's been destroyed. Now, of course, this is going to compel them to want to get nuclear weapons, which is where this thing spirals out of control from here, right? Because now they don't trust the IAEA. They're never going to trust the US again. And so they're going to want to get nuclear weapons. Now, the vessels are transiting out of the strait, and Iranian warships are leaving Bandar Abbas. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Iranian naval vessels may be departing from the port of Bandar Abbas. So far, Iran's navy appears to have been spared in the recent Israeli strikes. We're closely monitoring the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. That's from an open source intelligence account on Telegram. Now, why would they want to leave? Well, of course, they would not want to be struck, but they could also be getting ready to enforce some sort of blockade of that strait somehow, by mining it, by, you know, checking ships, commandeering vessels, things of that nature. Once again, the Iranian MP, Manan Raisi, says the nuclear complex in Fordow was not damaged by the U.S. strike. If Iran doesn't respond, it sets a precedent, of course, because they're basically saying, yeah, come and attack us, United States, and we will do nothing. So they have to respond. It's just a question of how do they respond. Now, if they only respond symbolically, then the exact same thing that is going to happen that happened with the Israelis. What did they do? The Israelis killed 2 of their high-ranking officials at an embassy in Syria. Iran did True Promise 1. Okay, Israel again assassinated a leader of Hamas inside Iran, and I think they did a few other things. So what did Iran do? Okay, they did True Promise 2. More impactful, still largely symbolic, right? So they didn't establish deterrence. So because they're only doing these symbolic responses and not doing anything meaningful, the other side is like, okay, so you're saying that we can diminish your capabilities by 20% and you'll only diminish us by 5%? We'll take that deal. So you can bet that the U.S. is going to join in again if the Iranians do a symbolic counterattack. 100%. Who wouldn't take that deal? Of course they're going to do it again. I mean, to think that they've amassed all this equipment in the Middle East just for this one-shot deal, flying 3 stealth bombers, making it look all subterfuge by having the stealth bombers go through this circuitous route, you know, through Guam and getting the transponders and all that stuff. That's not 4D chess. I mean, this is the most telegraph punch in history. Even Seymour Hersh, you know, I think he was in on it. I think he must have been. How does he still walk around and leak such crucial information? Look, we all knew it was, well, I knew it was coming long before a lot of these other channels were even talking about it. You guys know that. But in the last week, everybody pretty much knew. And then Seymour Hersh knew exactly. So I'm thinking that this whole Fordow thing is a diversion from something bigger. And that's not a big conspiracy at this point because we see how these people operate. They get you, it's just like a magician, you know, they get you focused on one thing and they really try to train you to focus on that one thing while they do the trick on the other side, oblivious to your attention. So again, if Iran doesn't respond, it's setting a big precedent that you can bomb the shit out of us and we won't do anything. When Trump says that if there's no agreement soon, then there will be more action, what does he mean by that? According to him, they no longer have a nuclear program. So what does he mean by that, right? It doesn't make any sense. You destroyed their nuclear enrichment facilities. All of them, you claim. So that should be that. That should at least have set them back 5 to 10 years. Why continue the campaign? Why are the Israeli warplanes still in the sky? And of course, if they didn't destroy the Fordow facility, like, even if they did, that wouldn't appease Israel. And if they didn't, then that certainly wouldn't appease Israel. So Iran has to be careful, of course, because now the U.S. is looking for an opportunity, which is just really silly how this is, like, the world is watching this play out. And the majority of the world, with the exception of the brainwashed people in the West, are watching this play out in slow motion. Israel totally attacks Iran for no reason. They making a reason. They're making Iran out to be this monster who's attacking everybody, when realistically they aren't. When you understand the history of the region, sure, there's maybe some, look, it's a long, storied story, and you know, it's complicated, but the world is looking at this like, you just attacked their nuclear facilities And now you want them to attack you so you can declare all-out war. And then the United States is going to act, you know, like people are actually going to believe this. Is it going to matter? No, because might makes right. It is going to matter to Russia and China at some point. The question is when, right? The question really is when. The Russians really want the U.S. to commit to a ground war in Iran. And everybody says that that's an impossibility because of the mountainous terrain and yada, yada, yada. I would put nothing past these people. Nothing. We are living in unprecedented times, and nothing is beyond the realm of possibility at this point in time. Now, here is what their foreign minister had to say, and I'll conclude with this. The United States, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, has committed a grave violation of the UN Charter, international law, and the NPT, Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, by attacking Iran's peaceful nuclear installations. The events this morning are outrageous and will have everlasting consequences. Each and every member of the UN must be alarmed over this extremely dangerous, lawless, and criminal behavior. Ooh, I'm sure the US and Israel are shaking in their boots. These guys have been designated as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court. Do you think they give a shit? Nope. In accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interests, and people. So that's the obligatory statement that you say before you go to war. So, yeah, they're going to war. I mean, the IRGC said that they're now in a state of war, which should have been obvious from the get-go, but they're playing dumb like the Russians, who, even though they know they've been fighting NATO this whole time, still feel that they have to continuously prove that because they don't want to engage NATO because they don't want a nuclear war. They understand that these guys want to use nukes. They're looking for an excuse to use nukes at this point in time. Let me just quickly thumb through my Telegram feed here and make sure that we're not missing any up-to-date news, because looks like they got a launcher before it was getting ready to launch. You know, things are just moving so fast. It is so tumultuous that they're claiming that Israelis are claiming they targeted 8 Iranian ballistic missile launchers. So, you know, these are some pretty big setbacks for the Iranians. So until we see them establish deterrence in some way, the U.S. will just keep moving forward. Why wouldn't they? Why would you think otherwise? All right. Anyways, guys, that's what I got for you tonight. I hope that gives you something to think about. And the short and skinny of it is, yeah, this is only the beginning. Okay, this is the entry into the conflict. This is nowhere near the end of U.S. involvement. It is only going to get more intense and more committed from this point forward. Check out the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel for how you can get prepared. Thanks for watching. Take care.